Good afternoon. My name's Mo Sayed, and I'm an immigration attorney with Offit Kurman in the Bethesda office. I am happy today to be presenting to you on a topic that's of current interest. It's always been interesting, but I think it's even more pressing right now, and that is how to address delays in the processing of immigrant and non-immigrant visas. Thank you for registering and for joining us today. Please do, keep in mind that there are slides that we are using. I hope you have access to the slides. They will be emailed along with the recording of today's session, and I believe we'll have the file, the PowerPoint available in the GoToWebinar box in the materials, I believe, section, so you can find it there. Okay, it's nice to be able to connect with all of you in this fashion, particularly in this unfortunate COVID-19 pandemic situation. So it's a way to connect and have some social contact in this social distancing environment. And hopefully by the end of this, I will have clarified some of the more complicated questions. If you have questions, please email them to me or put them in the chat box in the GoToWebinar portal. I will try to get to them if we have time. If I don't get to them during the session, I'll try to get back to you with answers on email. So we have today, I'm going to start with an overview of the visa and immigration delays, and I'll explain why I say visa and immigration separately. And then I'll talk to you about the remedies for the delays, which is obviously what everyone's interested in. There's my email for you to send your questions, and as I've already said, the recording will be available to you, and I request that you share it with others that may be interested in this topic, and email us if you want to get yourself or others on our mailing list. So we are right now doing these webinars on a weekly basis. Okay. All right, so let's move on. Why the delays happen? And it's a very broad area. We are looking at many different types of applications and different procedural postures. So that's our first topic we'll go over. The next is what has the COVID-19 situation created? What has it placed on top of the regular types of delays that were taking place? Then I'm going to talk about, the next two bullet points really try to separate the two agencies that are involved in the situation. So you have the USCIS, which essentially operates within the 50 states. Okay, so if you're in the U.S. and you're seeking a benefit, you deal with the USCIS, which it could be family-based or work-based. If you're outside the U.S. and you're needing a visa or another benefit, even benefits for U.S. citizens, for their families, then you're dealing with an embassy or a consulate, which are under the Department of State. And so there's different types of delays that happen there. And then next, how do you with the USCIS, with the State Department, what are your options to expedite things? And then next, once you've exhausted all your options that are available with the agencies themselves, what are options beyond that? Can a U.S. Senator help? Can a Congressman help? There's an Office of USCIS Ombudsman. Can they help? So that's what we're going to look at today. And then finally, if nothing else works, when is it time to file a federal lawsuit? And can that be a viable option? Okay, so let's look at what some of the delays are. In this is just even before COVID-19, I guess we had processing times that increased 46%, right? So that's a big number, and so we're seeing just system-wide delays in the USCIS side of processing these applications, and we go up. If we look at the last 2 years before 2019, the increase was 46%. If we go back further than that, and this is that's actually fiscal year 2014, the increase is 91%, right? So pretty dramatic. So a lot of people are concerned and worried about their family members or their employees or themselves, and they're asking questions. How do we how do we make these delays? How do we help out the situation? What can we do to speed things up, right? And what's interesting is that the applications overall actually went down by 17%. Let's say we're looking at 2018 data, but the processing times continued to rise, which is also unusual. H-1B petitions, which are frequently used by companies to hire foreign workers, a lot of IT workers, a lot of healthcare workers are on those categories. Those petitions used to take maybe a few months, 2, 3, 4 months, are now taking up to a year, and which is the non-immigrant visa, is the H-1B. And then when we move to the immigrant visa category, you're looking at like about 8 to 10 months or even a year, when it used to take about 3 months. On naturalization cases, you have about 10 months to almost sometimes a year. On simple cases, that used to take about 5 months. And there's in all these categories, you can imagine the stress and the pressures on these people, because let's say for naturalization cases, if somebody wants to become a citizen so that then they can sponsor their wife or parents, they really are waiting on that naturalization to happen so that they can be united with the rest of their family. Same thing with all these categories, because you have people's careers on hold and employers under pressure, to get critical workers, right? So then let's take a look here. From time to time, I look at my other screen because I have some notes over there. Just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. On naturalization, the other big thing is that you have certain benefits that folks qualify for after they are citizens, right? So Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, health, important things which folks are entitled to, especially for the elderly community. Parents of green card holders or parents of U.S. citizens that want to come and live with their children in the U.S. They often don't do it because they're worried about healthcare. And if the naturalization process takes a long, long time, then that can be a huge deterrent. Okay, so let's move on now. So what's the big deal, right? What is the issue, right? Why are delays so bad? Now, a couple of things I just highlighted. I mean, obviously, individual situations have a lot of nuance, and I can give you a couple of examples of hugely compassionate situations where people are stuck and they can't do anything. They don't know how long it's going to take. The first one I've seen a lot is that I have companies that have a need for a professional worker, a worker, let's say, that's a critical worker that's based at a overseas, foreign affiliate. It could be like, for example, an IT company that has a lot of clients in the U.S. and they have a back office, say in India or Hong Kong or Singapore or whatever, and they want their person to come here because they have to work with a particular client and they have a pressing need now and no one else can do that work. I've had cases, seriously, where these people have been stuck for a year and a half, and the need then dies, right? So, and there's a huge economic loss. So the business community is, certainly impacted by delays. I have doctors who are, let's say, on a J1 visa, which is what they get when they're coming initially as a resident. And they have very finite duration of their contracts, and there's so many delays with visa processing in some countries that often the visa is issued like with barely a month left in their duration of their tenure. Overall, seeing these delays, a lot of talented foreign national employees will choose not to come to the U.S. because they know that there's so much uncertainty and risk that they could invest in their career here, but not get a green card and be stuck, for years and years, and so they just get fed up and they leave, and so there's a loss of talent. Other countries like Canada, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore. There's other places where this highly educated talent can choose to go because they're tired of waiting and the uncertainty. For people that are already in the U.S. and they've been sponsored, let's say a U.S. citizen has sponsored a spouse, and I had the situation very recently. There was a spouse who was working on another visa type, and she got sponsored by a husband. And usually with these family-based petitions, while they're pending, the family member of a U.S. citizen gets a work authorization. In some cases, green card holders can also sponsor family members. It used to be that the work authorization and the travel authorization used to come in within 60 to 90 days. And so while they're waiting often for a year and a half, they at least have an authorization to work. But now these authorizations are taking 6-7 months, and these people can't work, and it's financially just hugely burdensome and sometimes not feasible because they just leave and they have a job somewhere else because they just can't finance themselves. In the case I was talking about, we got very lucky because it just really came down to like the last minute where this person had like 2 weeks left on her work authorization, and she was actually supporting the family. The husband didn't really at that point have the resources to support them, and her job continuing was critical to them staying in the U.S. And so we did try in that case. I'll get to this later. How we were able to expedite it, and so they got it within the last 2 weeks of her work authorization, and so that was a good thing. And I'm not, this is focused more on the business and the family side of our immigration system. This presentation, but there's a whole other area of humanitarian asylees, refugees, and that's just so heartbreaking because these folks are very vulnerable. A lot of times, you can imagine they're really desperate to get work and they're waiting for work authorizations, and so those delays are just heartbreaking. Okay, so with that, let's move on to the next slide. I think I've touched some of this touched on some of this earlier on why the delays happen, and I'll try to maybe give a roadmap of what are the different factors, right? So first off, you're gonna look at what type of benefit you're talking about, right? Is it a family-based immigration or a fiancé visa? And the kinds of proof that is required in those cases is different from an employment-based visa or a business visa, which is like an intercompany transfer, or an investment visa where you have a principal investor that's buying a business in the U.S. or setting up a new business, and they're getting a visa on that basis. So the different agency locations, offices that handle these visas, the specific processes are different, right? So that's the first level. Second level, okay, there's some types of visas that need a prior approval from the USCIS, and then you go to the embassy and apply there to actually come into the U.S. So that could be two levels of delays. There's some visa types where you go straight to the consulate. You don't deal with the USCIS at all, and then that's a separate set of issues. Now, I find generally that the USCIS is a lot more accessible than the consulates, because some of the consulates, they will not respond to inquiries. They just really have no process of any type of customer support, right? And it's even worse in certain countries of the world that are like huge populations where the consulates are just swamped or they're not staffed enough because the countries are like high risk countries and it's difficult to get a lot of staff there, right? So those are staffing shortages. Now we can look at the strength of the case. I would think that on stronger cases with good evidence, the cases move a little quicker, compared to weaker cases that are not well documented. So that's where putting in a lot of work at the front end is important to make sure there's not important evidence missing, because what happens is that you have the initial review by an officer, let's say even if it's with the USCIS or consulate, the initial review is done by somebody at a lower level. Now they have authority to approve, but if they're confused, if they can't understand the case, if they don't think the evidence is clear, they may have to put the file to their supervisor, right? Another level above them, and then that could push it into more delays because they maybe have a lot of cases to review, right? So presenting your strongest case at the front, right, is so important, and that's where having a lawyer, a good lawyer, can help tremendously, right? This may be sort of self-evident, which is the idea that the prior immigration record, any types of criminal record, they can create red flags. So if someone has been in the U.S. and violated, like they've worked without authorization, or they overstayed a visa, then they are going to have delays, because all of those issues will get a lot of attention. Having a criminal record will also create more attention, and there's more facts to be revealed, more documents, and depending on how this whole profile is presented, will impact the timing of the processing. One of the issues, this is actually a substantive issue, but also a delay issue is the intent to immigrate. And that's relevant to non-immigrant visas. So a lot of types of non-immigrant visas, with the exception of a few, the applicant has to demonstrate that their intent is to go to the U.S. not to live there, but to be there for a short duration, and then they they have strong ties to their home country to go back to. So it's very important to know what type of visa are you applying for, and do you have to demonstrate a lack of intent to immigrate. So that's an important issue, and there's usually in some countries there's just a presumption that they are a flight risk, that they're going to come to the U.S. and they're going to stay and never go back. So it's very important to document the intent not to immigrate, right, to return back to the home country. Next item is administrative processing, and you'll hear this term a lot, and it's associated with visa applications at consulates and embassies. And so what happens is people go, they apply for a visa that's done online, they pay the fee, they get their interview. At the interview, they may be asked for additional documents. They may be told to submit the documents in the mail or by a courier. Each embassy has its own process. And then when there's a situation where the consular officer feels they need more information, they can invite the applicant back for another interview. Recent case of mine, I had this where it was for a green card for a physical therapist, and she had gone through a long process in the U.S. of getting a employment-based immigration application approved by the employer, and then she went in, she's in the Philippines, she went and applied for her green card at the U.S. Embassy in Manila. They did the interview, and they insisted on, we had a job offer, a contract submitted, but the embassy wanted a current dated notarized offer letter, which we provided. And even then, the case says that it's under administrative processing, and it's been, we've been waiting, and now we're trying through a senator to help. However, now with the COVID-19 situation, all these embassies are shut down, so there's not really much hope that anything will happen. But the case says administrative processing. Now, it means two things. That one is like a criminal background check, and then another part is a general check for eligibility. And there's multiple agencies that are involved in this process, and you never know what's going on. It's like like a black box, and you can't look inside it. You don't know what's happening. If you ask for updates, they'll say administrative processing. They don't really say what the issue is. And I've had this in clean cases, like people that have visited the U.S. multiple times, have been working in the U.S. on different visa categories, have clean records, and we have no idea what's going on. Right? So that's kind of like, you do not want to get stuck in administrative processing. It can add 3 months, 6 months, a year. And it is quite common these days for this to happen. Okay. Country of origin depends on where you're from, right? So some countries are considered as high risk. There's security risks. There are fraud risks. There's some countries where there's a lot of fraud, unfortunately, and so those applications get a lot more scrutiny. And in those cases, you have to prepare the cases much more thoroughly. So the last point I have is the priority date. Okay, I'm not gonna get into this in a whole lot of detail, but priority date for certain immigrant visas, it is a system by which our immigration agencies organize applicants from different countries and by different types of green cards. Okay, so the idea is that in any given year, there are finite number of certain types of green cards or permanent residence types, which basically are for the highly skilled workers, the Einstein visas, the extraordinary ability people, the investment-based immigrants, family-based immigrants. They are arranged by the type of benefit, which they have certain number to give out every year, and then by the country of origin. So China, India, there's a huge number of applicants every year, but they can only get a finite number of Chinese people or Indian people or folks from other parts of the world are arranged in different categories, and they have to wait. So every year there's a allocation of visas, and they have to wait their turn, in some cases for 10 years, 13 years. And so these priority dates determine when one of these, if you're in that particular category, you can look at this chart that is published every month, and you can know when you can apply for the next level of the final processing, right? So I get a lot of calls. I get a lot of requests from folks where their parents are waiting, the U.S. citizen parents, they are in a separate category, so they don't have to be in the priority date. But siblings, children, certain employees, they have to wait, and they are sometimes very urgent situations, and they contact me to see if we can do anything. Unfortunately, there is no way to get around a priority date. There is no way that the priority date is going to be waived. So if that's where the delay is, don't waste your time. There's not anything you can do about it. Okay. Okay. So let me real quick, right? So you might be wondering, what is the legal basis of some of these delays? All right. So we all know the Trump administration announced a very, restrictive approach towards legal immigration. Okay, we've seen several travel bans from many different countries. We have a executive order on Buy American, Hire American. What that did was it basically, it emphasized the need to enforce the immigration laws in a very thorough manner to vet out any potential harm to the U.S. economy or U.S. workers. So what that did was it just made the immigration officers a lot more nitpicky. Personally, I don't think that the processing prior was in any way unprofessional or lax. But anyway, we've seen that officers now will request a ton of more documents than was the norm. The other thing that happened is a memo that came out in the USCIS that's called as a no deference memo, which means that there is no deference to a prior approval. So in the past, what the trend was if somebody was on a H-1B visa or an E or an L, and they were going to renew, right? So they already were in that situation, right? In that visa, they were in that job, and they were then going to renew that visa with even better credentials, right? Like they've now had a track record of working, they've now had a track record of salary raises, of obviously helping American companies, and so the deference policy used to be that, they're already pretty much fully vetted, so why waste agency resources on doing a full adjudication? But now that's what happens, is that every time you apply, you have to do a full re-adjudication. There's no deference to the prior approval, right? So you're in the same bucket as someone that's applying for the very first time. So more resources being used, more time being consumed. There's now also interviews for all employment-based green cards, which delays things. That was not the case in prior years. The USCIS felt that they were not necessary because most of these people had been very, they were already either here, on a work visa anyway, and so there was not any threat of fraud or any security concerns, and the interview was basically not very necessary. It didn't add much to the already lengthy process that had happened. But however, now we are seeing interviews, so that adds to delays. And what's happened is this, I think you've heard of the term request for evidence. We've seen a dramatic rise in requests for evidence, which typically we put in a lot of work at the front end, working with our clients to present cases that are, superbly well organized, well presented, with all the evidence up front. And so we expect that we've worked hard with our clients and we submitted an application that is adequate. However, in most instances, we will get a list of questions from the agencies, known as a request for evidence, that will essentially ask for the same things again. And so then we're left to wonder, okay, well, what is really the weakness? Sometimes we know that there are some weaknesses that we can then go back and resubmit evidence, right? But it just becomes a hugely time-consuming thing and almost like a formality that, hey, okay, just send us everything again and bring it up to date, perhaps. And that takes a lot of time because you can then, now we don't have premium processing, which was a system where we could get a response within 15 days. But these things could stay pending for months and months, right? The other thing that's happened is that, the government has devoted resources. They've turned away resources from the adjudication or the case processing and allocated officers and personnel to the enforcement side, right, which we've seen a lot of enforcement actions, going after undocumented people, denaturalization, and a whole other set of issues. So we don't have resources, we don't have personnel to process, we don't have enough personnel to process our cases, right? And suspension of premium processing, which, again, it was a very nice thing where clients who wanted to spend an extra money, just approximately $1,500 or so, to get in a separate program where applications that would otherwise maybe take 4, 5, 6 months to process, we could get processing within 15 days. So now that's been suspended, so that creates, everyone's now in the same boat. There's no premium processing, and it's very, frustrating for some people. I have a little note here where, right, for these delays that we started seeing in 2017, back then, I mentioned earlier that we, getting work permits took 90 days or so to process, and now it's been taking, almost 6 months or so, right? So it's a tough situation. What can you do to speed up the case? I would say from the very get-go, prepare for expect an RFE. All right. I had a case where we had a situation where this was for a mother of a U.S. citizen, and the way somebody's evidence is presented, all the data has to match up. The names of spellings have to be accurate or disclosed if there's any different, spelling. So for this one lady, she had an Arabic name, and the Arabic name on some documents was rendered in a different spelling in English, than some other documents. So like her passport and birth certificate had one spelling of her name, and then the child's birth certificate had a slightly different spelling, right? So when we were submitting that packet, I expected that this issue will come up. And so I asked my client to provide some affidavits, or sometimes we get expert reports from language experts that say that that it explained the issue, that in a certain language you can have different renderings of the name in English. But we weren't able to get that document at the time of the submission. And as expected, in a couple of months, we get an RFE saying that, the name doesn't match and you need to provide us some more data. So then we got, it's really up to the client, if they want to spend the time and money in getting the extra evidence, or just take a chance on leaving something for an RFE. But it's better to submit your strongest evidence up front, so that even if you do get an RFE, it's easier and quicker to respond to. So prepare for the RFE from the very get-go, right? Get all your data, prepare everything with a almost paranoid mindset, right? Just prepare everything, expecting that everything is going to be nitpicky, and there's going to be a lot of questions asked. All right, so country-specific documents take a long time sometimes. Like I had a case where we were asked to provide a police report from countries where the applicant had lived for a certain number of months. And the client told me after some of these deadlines arose that she had lived in Israel for a while, and it fell under the category that we had to get police certificates from Israel. And it was a very lengthy process. Had the client disclosed this earlier, we would have got those documents months in advance, so that we didn't add another couple of months of delay on our end. Okay, so that's why folks sometimes they want to do these things, these applications themselves. I always encourage them to work with an attorney, so that, because we've seen some of these things before and we can help to prevent delays, right? I had some cases here. Yeah, and the RFE, again, as I said, it's just kind of becomes a re-adjudication of the initial case, so it does become frustrating. But it's just the lay of the land right now, all right? We had an executive order recently, which also impacts, I think the main thing you need to know is that we have a 60-day suspension on green cards generally, okay? So I would say, if you have specific questions about this executive order, I guess the 60 days will end in June, but it might be extended. I've seen a recent letter by some U.S. senators that is asking the president to make the order extended beyond the 60 days, and possibly even widen the scope of it. But we'll see how that goes. Alrighty. COVID-19. Okay, so the clear impact, right, of COVID-19 is that there's social distancing. So a lot of the services that require in-person processing, they have been shut, right? So within the USCIS, like when you apply for a green card, when you apply for a work authorization, many other benefits, you have to go into an office and get fingerprinted, okay? Because they issue you then later an ID, like if you want to renew your green card, or you're applying for, the first time you're applying for a green card, they're going to fingerprint you and take your photo and produce a card. But they are not doing fingerprinting anymore. For interviews, even like for green cards, work-based, family-based, naturalization interviews, all kinds of interviews, they are not happening. So folks are getting letters saying that they're going to reschedule, and we don't know yet. I believe there was an announcement that the USCIS will restart some of these services in June, I think. But that all depends. It's up in the air. Same thing, consulates are shut down, so you can apply, but you're not going to get an interview. They are saying that in emergency cases there are some services available in emergent, but I haven't really seen anything. What's happening is that for work authorizations, green cards, I have some notes here for that's with the USCIS, so they're stuck. There's no progress. The consulates, like for example, you'll have approved H petitions. Right now, we are waiting for a lot of H visa approvals, and when we get them, if our clients are overseas, they are stuck because they will not get visa stamps and be able to come and work in the U.S. until the consulates open. There's folks with approved marriage-based petitions, like I have one right now, which is really nice couple that husband lives here, wife lives overseas, and they've been waiting and waiting. The whole process itself took like a long time, a year and a half or so, and now she had her interview and she was all set to get it approved, but she doesn't know now when they'll actually issue her permanent resident visa. We have fiancé visas, employees, even healthcare workers waiting at the embassies. So, it's really bad. So, okay, how do you check? So that was, I just want to bookend that. That was like an overview of all of the different processes and, well, most of them, and then what the delays look like, why the delays exist. So now we're getting into like the meat of this thing, right? How do we address these delays? What do we do if we are in this situation? All right. So on this slide, I want you to notice. Okay, so this is a slide where we can go. There's a website where we can go and check case processing times. Now this is very sort of nuanced because it's by type. Like, so if you see here, obviously, here's the notice, right? USCIS offices are closed. Select your form number and the office that is processing your case. So, depending on the form type, the benefit type you're applying for, and where you are located, where the geographic allocation is, there's different processing times. Okay, so I want to just go to this website itself, right? Let's see if I can do this. Okay, here we go. Right. So hopefully now we're on the actual website of the USCIS. So what I'm going to do is, let's say I have applied for, let's pick a work authorization. Let's pick a work authorization, right? So I've got like a spouse that sponsored me, and I've applied for a work authorization. Okay, that's the form. All right, and then let's say I'm here. Let's go to the Texas Service Center. All right, and we click this. All right, and it tells us this chart. Let's see. Okay, so hopefully you can see this. This chart tells us, like, so if we have an employment-based employment authorization based on a student visa, 4 to 5 months, based on asylum, based on a adjustment application, which will be generally your family-based or work-based, 4 weeks to 5 months. So these times are actually not bad, but yeah, if you're in the outlier on the 5 months, that's, really long. Now, so what can you do? If you are outside these dates, right? So if it's been more than 5 months and you're waiting, and that means if this is the date that you filed your case, right, and you're still waiting, then what you can do is go down here and click this inquire about a case outside normal processing times. All right, so this is your first level. What you're going to do is click here, and then it's going to give you a form, which is this online form that you can see, right? You fill in all the case details, and this is what's considered as a electronic inquiry, right? So once you're outside that processing time, here's what you do. This is the first thing that you do, okay? You submit this, and then we wait, okay? Now, most of the times, in my experience, there's a very, very slim chance that this will actually really do anything imminently. But you need to create a record. You need to do a few of these 1-2 times. And then if this doesn't work, you go to your next level of remedies, all right? So let's go back to our slide. Okay, all right, so it's actually a good system. At least it helps you to navigate to a specific location. And so in this case, this was a different type of a different type of benefit, and these processing times vary. And so it's like by the geographic location and the type of case. If there's some service centers that are very backed up, right? So you're very unlucky if you're processing there. Others are quicker. All right, so this link right here, inquire about a case outside normal processing time, that's what you're going to do, all right? And this is what it tells you on the next screen. You can select some of these options if sometimes, there's issues with the mail, a lot of issues in the mail. Things get lost, you have been set up for an interview and you don't know about it. And that's one of the nice things also about having an attorney involved, because the attorney will get a duplicate copy of all the correspondence. And sometimes I feel that at a home address versus an office address, there's less chances of mail getting misplaced, right? So, all right. So for embassies and consulates, the process is that you have an online application, you get an interview, you get either approved, denied, or they put you in administrative review. There's not really any clear timelines. We don't know. Like with the embassies, you have no idea how long they'll take to process. So in a majority of cases, the approvals are, the same day they tell you, but in a lot of cases, they'll say, we need more information, your case is in administrative review. And unlike with the USCIS, where there is some kind of process, with the embassies, there's really no process. So some embassies are better than others. You can email them, call them. Sometimes they take phone calls, but other embassies and consulates, they're so swamped, they don't even respond. Okay. So there is a way at the front end and during the processing of making an expedite request. Okay. This link here goes to the USCIS site that lists the factors on which an expedite request can be made. And so typically when I do this, if there's some, I had one where it was a U.S. citizen married to an Iraqi lady that lived in the Kurdistan region, and there was a lot of violence there. So there was threats to her safety, and we wanted to bring her over and explain to the U.S. government all the different humanitarian reasons which affected this couple. So we, in addition to the actual application itself, we put a separate packet of like a cover letter describing the whole situation, the area where she lived, the recent events of violence, and all the psychological, fear, and then obviously the fear that the husband experienced, and news articles, even an expert report by an Iraqi professor that said that there was a lot of risk to this person. and we included that expedite request on our initial submission, and thankfully it was approved, and she got her visa actually fairly quick. So if you can show a severe financial loss to a company or a person, and then other criteria. If you can show urgent humanitarian reasons, so sometimes it's it could be like a death of a family member or severe illness that someone has to come and take care of their parent or close relative. If we have a situation where there's a U.S. government interest, that's always helpful. If there's an employee of or someone that's working in the interest of the U.S. government, that's going to be considered. And then if there's been a error made by the USCIS, so these requests can be made in the initial submission. They can be made during the pending petition, and after the delay has occurred already. They are helpful. I feel super helpful that create a record of at least an attempt to try to expedite in the formal way. So this is just giving some specifics of what the expedite request should contain, right? So you cite your legal authority, you put your supporting documents, and photographs or affidavits, whatever you can get, and submit it in the expedite request. If you've already submitted and you're waiting, then there's a process of calling this USCIS number and giving them the receipt number of the pending application and explaining to them the reason for the expedite. So they may take information verbally over the phone. They're usually going to ask for hard copy documents to be submitted, and they give instructions at that time. They sometimes give a fax number, or they ask you to mail them to a particular address. Okay, so definitely recommend doing this. I think my notes here I had, now the expedite request, right, it doesn't mean that they're going to approve the case right away. It just means that they might put it in a priority stack, right? So when they say, okay, your expedite request is approved, it doesn't mean that right then your actual case will be approved, right? So they may even ask for more evidence after that. So anyway, that's just to be clear, okay? There is a office within the USCIS called the USCIS Ombudsman. This is a website. What they will usually require, so this is an oversight on the USCIS. So if you've done all the steps that we've been talking about before, right? If you've done the electronic request and then done an expedite request and no luck, then you can go to this website. They have a form that you can fill out and explain what the situation is, and they often are effective. I don't think always, but I would say maybe in a third of the cases, or maybe 25% of the cases, I have seen some results. Okay, all right. So here's what so all of this is building up to this step, right? So now you've done all the different things you could. You have emails, phone calls, you got these electronic requests, and nothing's worked, right? Then it's the time to go to the senator. And I am honestly such a big fan of this process, because in every case, the senators, congressmen, they have a very well laid out process, usually online on their websites, and they are effective. Effective in the sense that it doesn't mean that once you do this thing that your case will be approved right away. Sometimes it is. Sometimes you have a file that's stuck somewhere and no one's looking at it, and you do one of these requests, and boom, within a few days you get your approval. So it's important to follow the procedures, which are not so, they're very user-friendly, okay? So they ask the clients for a release, right? So in order for the senator to get records related to the Immigration Service, you sign a release providing them the ability to talk to USCIS, and you submit it. Usually within a week, I get a response from them saying, okay, we've got your request. We're going to send it on to either the USCIS or to the embassy, and we'll update you once we get a response. Then within 30 days or 60 days, the USCIS or the State Department is going to write back saying, here's what's happening. So you can actually get a real meaningful status update at times. I mean, most of the times they get this boilerplate email that, it's under process and we can't tell you anything, and the senator will simply forward that response to you. But it's good. What you do in that sense is you may not get an approval right away, but you'll put your file in a stack where once they do start processing, it might get to the front of the line, right? So I do highly encourage this process, and it's not that bad, right? So you go to the website. So I just picked Senator Kane, and he's got this link here that he's seeking help with the Immigration, State Department, and visas. You click that, follow the instructions. It's very self-explanatory, and make that request, right? So I think, I was going to say the good thing about this is that you've made a contact. Over time, the staff of the senators or congressmen, they really become advocates. Like, some of them have been very helpful. Like, they will become advocates for your case. Like, you submit the request, wait 30 days, nothing's happened. That representative will kind of become your ally, and they'll say, oh, wow, they've not responded, or they've not approved the case, so we're going to go back to them. And often when 2-3 times the senator has made inquiries, then I do feel that it exerts pressure on these agencies to act. All right. Now, your final, let's say, what should we call this thing? This is your magic option. All right. And this is like your, I don't know, all I can think of is like King Arthur's sword, the magic sort of solution. Not destructive, but it does push the agencies. And that's called as a writ of mandamus. That's your federal litigation, right? So, because it's a federal agency, you file a case in the federal court. Washington, D.C., the U.S. District Court in the District of Columbia, because the USCIS and State Department are located here, a lot of cases get filed here. And essentially what I do in these cases, and I've done these in different states as well. Like, I'm licensed in New York and Virginia and D.C., and also in Tennessee. So, I mean, and what you can do is find a lawyer. Most of the times, like, if you find somebody in D.C., they could do it. It's basically a recitation of all the facts, the history, the attempts to resolve, through the agency directly, the attempts to resolve through the senator, and summarize all of this, and summarize the delay, summarize all the negative factors that are occurring due to the delay, and ask the judge to order the USCIS or the State Department to act on the application, right? You can't ask them to approve it, the judge can't tell the agency to approve the case, because the approval has to happen on the merits of the case. So it's important when you select to file a lawsuit that your case be strong, right? If there's a weak case, then there's no point filing a lawsuit, because it's going to become a long litigation and expensive and create delays that exist even otherwise. So there's no point getting into it. But if there's a clear, case and a delay, we've had these cases on a number of different situations. I've had these for parents of U.S. citizens waiting for their green cards. I've had them for permanent residents waiting for their citizenship, sometimes 2-3 years. Some countries are in bad shape, like, for example, Iranians are facing a lot of delays. I feel like a lot of my Irani clients are going for this option, and it works. I've had doctors that are stuck in India waiting for J1 visas. I've had, fiancés waiting and nothing happening. So what happens, just to clarify, is that we filed a lawsuit. The government then has 60 days to respond and explain what the delay, why the delay, right? And a hearing is set up, or a deadline is set up for the government to respond. In my experience, usually at that 60-day mark, I get a call or an email from the government, and they say, we need an extension. and in return for the extension, we promise to look into the case for you and get back to you, right? So usually I'll give that first extension, and 90% of the time, I find that the case gets approved after that call, right? So that's your ideal situation, and the reason that happens is that I believe that the agencies are so swamped, they don't want to get pulled into litigation. And by doing this federal lawsuit, you put a lot of pressure on them, and because what happens is that now you have the attorney general, the district attorney, you have a separate agency, the lawyers, right? So these are not employees of the USCIS; these are Justice Department. They then are contacting the USCIS and asking for evidence and information on delays. So they don't want to get into that. And so on a clean case, they'll approve it, right? So, but making that whole record before all this is very important. So generally, I mean, just real quick, a writ of mandamus is a lawsuit that, it's basically tells the government to fulfill its mandated duties. So legally, that's what the basis is. And you basically say that the government has to do its duty of deciding, and it has, the limitations on the government are that they have to make a decision within a reasonable time. Now, reasonable is not decided, and reasonable varies. But however, right, if it's several years and you're just, double what it takes normally, you could argue that, that's not reasonable. Alrighty, so. When to file a writ of mandamus? I mean, usually it's going to be like if you have a citizenship application or a green card application pending, and you've tried to get updates and they keep saying background check pending, and then you've also tried the info pass, which used to be like quite accessible, like where you could go online and make an appointment with the USCIS office and get to meet an officer face-to-face and talk about your case. You've tried that. It's not worked. Now the InfoPass is also very limited. It's not as easy as it used to be. You've done the congressional, inquiry, and there's some urgency, right? So you have to demonstrate some urgency that you need to work. You need to be with your relatives. You have some health issues. And so that then it's makes for a good complaint. Okay, so okay, I was trying to keep it to under 1 hour. We're just a little bit over. If you have questions or comments, please email me. That's my email address, mo.syed@offitkurman.com. The slides and recordings for this will be, available as well as for past webinars. Please look into it, and again, please circulate it to folks that might be interested. All right. Our next webinar is going to be next Thursday, and what I am going to talk about is the current immigration and visa system and how it presents challenges for small business owners during the COVID-19 crisis. And while there are challenges, there are some opportunities. So I wanted to discuss this issue. And so if you know folks that are interested in this matter, and if you yourself are interested, please contact me. If I haven't been able to get the questions during this session, and I did have some questions that got emailed to me earlier, but I'll try to respond to them by email. But if you don't get a response, please email me. Okay. All right, so that brings us to the end of today's presentation. I'm, very grateful that all of you joined. I want to say thank you also to Jennifer Helfand, our Director of Marketing. She does a wonderful job of bringing this content to all of you. So thank you, Jennifer. At the end, I want to wish you all health and safety, and we're all struggling through this difficult time, and I just want to send good positive vibes to all of you, and hope that you found it useful. So thank you so much, and goodbye for now. Have a good rest of the week.